We're joined on the line right now by Frank Gaffney from the Center for Security Policy. Frank, thanks for joining us here on Breitbart News Daily. So the thing I wanted to talk to you about first, Frank, is President Trump has just designated the Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. What do you make of this decision?
First of all, it's long overdue, Matt, and it's a great credit to the president that where other presidents have known this should be done and quailed at the prospect that there might be some retaliation by the Iranian government, or that they were seeking to, do some sort of nuclear deal with Iran, and they just looked the other way at the fact that this particular arm of the Iranian military, and by the way, some of its adjuncts like the Quds Force and Hezbollah, have been killing Americans in large numbers, notably with what are known as explosively formed penetrators, a kind of improvised explosive device that has proven especially deadly against American armored equipment. And, some estimates indicate that there are over 600 American servicemen, women, have lost their lives as a result of these kinds of attacks, to say nothing of what the IRGC, as it's known, has done elsewhere around the world to others as well, notably Israeli-related targets. And I just think that this is one of those moments where, as with the decision that the president took recently on the annexation by Israel of the Golan Heights, and his decision with respect to withdrawing from the horrible Obama bomb deal, as I call it, the nuclear deal with Iran, and his decision with respect to moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, he's bringing American policy at last into line with strategic realities and our vital national interests. And I couldn't be more proud of him and pleased that his team, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and others have been able to get this kind of course correction done.
Yeah, and so in response, Iran came out and designated the U.S. Army as a terrorist organization. What do you make of their response? Yeah, what do you make of their response?
Well, I think it's, the kind of lashing out that you would expect. And frankly, I think we may see more acts of violence against some of our personnel in the area. That's been the Pentagon's concern all along. But the truth of the matter is, we've been subjected to violence from these guys for a long time. And Matt, here's one other piece of this. The president has, and his Secretary of State, by designating the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps added an important new sanction to the economy of Iran, because about 50% of it, it's estimated, is basically owned and operated, otherwise controlled by this so-called military machine. And so I think for all these reasons, the petulance out of Tehran, the rhetoric denouncing us, and perhaps even some sort of lashing out, is a necessary cost to trying further to create conditions that will make it more and more and more difficult for this regime, not only to engage in terrorism, it's to be hoped, but quite possibly to survive.
Mm-hmm. So now the other big news is in the past couple of days here is that Sunday night President Trump relieved Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen of her command. I don't think it was Kirstjen Nielsen's intention to resign when she walked into that meeting in the White House, but can we play clip 1A? Guys, can we play clip 1A? It's Kirstjen Nielsen explaining her resignation.
I don't have any new announcements. I just want to thank the president again for the tremendous opportunity to serve this country. I'm forever grateful and proud of the men and women of DHS who work so hard every day to execute their missions and to protect the homeland. I really look forward to continuing to support them from the outside. I've spent the last 24 hours since yesterday talking with government officials, with administration officials, members of Congress to ensure a smooth transition. As you know, DHS has a vast array of missions. I want to make sure that we continue to execute them all with excellence through the transition. I share the president's goal of securing the border. I will continue to support all efforts to address the humanitarian and security crisis on the border. And other than that, I'm on my way to keep doing what I can for the next few days. So thank you all for being here.
So, Frank, what are your thoughts on Kirstjen Nielsen being removed from the Department of Homeland Security?
Well, first of all, let me just say, I thought that was a particularly gracious exit statement, and I give her credit for that. The truth of the matter is, as with the earlier observation, this was a step that was also long overdue. She was wildly over her head at DHS. There are few people who could competently manage this monstrosity of a bureaucracy, to be fair, but she simply didn't have the requisite competency in the space that is most urgently needed, and that is with respect to the ability to have secure borders and rigorously enforced immigration policies. And, this is a problem that has been dogging us for decades. As you know, Matt, you cover this assiduously, and it isn't going to be corrected just by changing out the leadership of DHS, though I'm hearing very good things about Kevin McAleenan. But I think it's necessary to have in that job at this particular moment in time somebody who has deep expertise in and particularly, professional responsibility for the management of these migrant flows that are creating a national security emergency, as the president has said. So I think this is a good step. I wish it had been done before. I think this is, frankly, part of a necessary house cleaning by the president of a number of people in the national security space who aren't up to the job, quite frankly, and I welcome that.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk that potentially Chris Kobach, former Secretary of State of Kansas, he was the Republican nominee for governor there. He lost the general election, but who's really solid on the issue of immigration, is being discussed as a potential replacement. What do you think about him or other people that have been mentioned, like Ken Cuccinelli, the former Attorney General of Virginia, have been mentioned? What do you think about the various candidates being thrown out there?
Well, these are both good men. I've known them a little bit. I think Chris would be an outstanding choice. He's really lived and breathed this immigration issue for quite some time. He would be a controversial pick, frankly. There are people who that don't like him, and the Democrats are going to be roughing up everybody. Let's face it, whether they've got the qualities that are needed for the job or not. So I think whoever the president picks on a permanent basis, if it's not McAleenan, and that may be his choice, will face a rough go of it in Congress. But there are people who can do this job better than Kirstjen Nielsen. And again, I'm delighted that the president's cleared the mix for that to happen.
Now, on Wednesday, Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea, is traveling to Washington to meet with President Trump. And the question, a big topic of discussion, of course, is going to be whether, where we are in the talks with North Korea and Kim Jong-un. What do you make of what's coming down the pike on that front?
Matt, let me get to that in just a second. Can I make one other point, if you'll indulge me? The other key thing that the president has done on this whole immigration issue, of course, as you know, is his designation of Stephen Miller as basically his czar in the White House on immigration policy. Stephen Miller is a first-class guy and deeply knowledgeable about this subject. I think that's a huge breakthrough. And by the way, the further anti-Semitism of Ilhan Omar and characterizing him as a white supremacist just speaks once again to the outrageousness of that woman. And I think is in a way a backhanded compliment and attesting to the formidable character of Stephen Miller. And
I couldn't agree more. I've known Stephen for many years, and he is a fantastic leader. He's very, very knowledgeable about all of these issues, and so there's literally nobody better who could be there beside President Trump on this stuff.
I agree. At his right hand. Just on this Korea deal. Moon Jae-in is, of course, the president of South Korea. He's coming to the White House tomorrow to meet with the president, as you mentioned. The trouble is that very few of us, I think, really appreciate how far left this guy is. And some of the people that he's brought in around him are arguably even more left. And in the South Korean context, what that means basically is very, very much aligned, hard as this is to believe, Matt, with North Korea. And what we're told, Moon Jae-in's principal agenda item in his conversation with President Trump is going to be begging the president to relieve sanctions on North Korea. In fact, the guy's in lobbying on behalf of Kim Jong-un, one of the most horrific despots in the world. And the president said, this maximum pressure campaign is going to continue. It should. He is trying to see what can be done diplomatically to denuclearize North Korea. Good on him. But let's be clear, Moon Jae-in is undermining the president's diplomatic efforts at every turn, both by reducing the readiness of his forces to deal with an invasion of the South by the North, by trying to end-run the sanctions, by providing financial and other kinds of assistance to the North, and most especially by signaling that he is perfectly comfortable with the idea of reunification of the Korean Peninsula on basically North Korea's terms. This is insanity. And yet that is the policy of the Korean government in South Korea at the moment. And I personally believe the president has to read in the Riot Act. I certainly hope he will.
So now, Frank, the other big thing I want to talk to you about today, and I saved the best for last, is the meeting you guys are doing at noon today, the Committee on Present Danger, China. I know that you, Newt Gingrich, Ted Cruz, our old executive chairman, Steve Bannon, who's the former chief strategist in the White House, used to host this show. Are all doing a big meeting on the threat that China faces presents to us. Can you tell us about the Committee on the Present Danger China?
Oh, with delight. Thank you, Matt. This is an entity that its predecessor in the mid-1970s was something I was imprinted with as a very young man. It helped Ronald Reagan when he was running for the presidency in 1980, define and advocate for a dramatic policy change from what had been practiced by successive Republican and Democratic presidencies during that decade of the 70s, namely détente, with the last totalitarian communist regime that sought our destruction, namely the old Soviet Union. And the President Reagan actually, as a candidate, joined that group. He adopted its strategy for taking down the USSR, and he actually pulled in a number of members of the organization to help him do that once he became president. We're inspired by that example and hopeful that a new, what we call Committee on the Present Danger China, might be able to play a similarly decisive role in helping Donald Trump, who understands, I think, very, very well, far better than any other president in my lifetime, the nature of the threat now posed by the Chinese Communist Party and the country that it is misruling. And so we're meeting today. We've got those eminent figures participating in it. We've also got a fantastic group of people who are members of this Committee on the Present Danger China. And I would commend to your listeners, if they care to follow the Facebook live stream starting about noon today, or go to the videos that we'll have there. We had a great rollout about 2 weeks ago at presentdangerchina.org. It's going to be a wonderful resource and hopefully help awaken our country to the threat we're facing from the Chinese Communist Party and help us defeat it.
Yeah, I think the Chinese threat, Frank, is the biggest threat that we've potentially ever faced. I've done a lot of reporting on this. I'm going to Taiwan this next week. I'm leaving Friday night, get in Sunday morning in Taiwan, and I'm going to spend a week there. And Taiwan is obviously the front lines against this. Just last week, they were. Sending jets, the Chinese were sending jets over the Taiwan Strait, crossing the center of it, and Ambassador Bolton called them out over it and said, Chinese military provocations won't win. I'm reading a tweet from Ambassador Bolton, who's the national security advisor to President Trump. He says, Chinese military provocations won't win any hearts or minds in Taiwan, but they will strengthen the resolve of people everywhere who value democracy. The Taiwan Relations Act and our commitment are clear. So the fact of the matter is that what the Chinese are trying to, the reason why this is important, the reason why what you guys are doing is probably the most important guidance for the administration and for President Trump, is because what the Chinese are trying to, can you lay out what they're trying to do? I mean, they're essentially engaged in a decades-long plan for global dominance to supplant the United States as a world superpower.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear you're going to Taiwan, because you're going to see, as you say, what this looks like on the front lines. We're going to talk about that today at our event. Matt, the Chinese couldn't be more clear about this, particularly under Xi Jinping. The mask has sort of slipped. It goes back to Deng Xiaoping, basically in 1991. He is said to have instructed the Communist Party at the time that, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union is over. The Soviet Union lost. A new Cold War between the United States and China is now underway. Now, he obscured that. He said the old hide and bide. He said, hide your capabilities and bide your time. It was a patient, as you say, decades-long strategy to build up both the economic capability, the intelligence mechanisms, the influence operations, and not least the military power to be able to become the dominant power in the world and to supplant the United States in the process. And one of the things that we talked about at our rollout event, and there are 21 superb brief analyses of what's been going on here that are at that site, presentdangerchina.org. And what it basically points to is that the Chinese have assiduously made it their business to pursue something called unrestricted warfare against the United States for the purpose of kicking us down and supplanting us in due course. And that due course is I think, now at hand. We are perilously close to the unrestricted warfare, the undeclared, unacknowledged warfare that the Chinese have been waging against us, suddenly rocketing into a kinetic kind, perhaps by accident, perhaps by miscalculation, perhaps by design, maybe in the South China Sea, maybe elsewhere in the world. And what we've been really focusing in on, this new Committee on the Present Danger China, Matt, is making sure people understand the full, multifaceted, comprehensive ways in which the Chinese are now poised to put all of that kind of planning, all of that kind of, world dominant, strategy into place. And we need to be, alive to this and taking steps to prevent it. That's
and the difference between the Soviets and the the communists in China. We obviously won the Cold War with the Soviets. The Soviet Union broke up. The wall came down. The difference between their approaches is the Soviets were like in your face about it, right? They were like very aggressive. They were very upfront about what they were doing. The Chinese kind of more sly about it, right? Like, I mean, about how they operate. They're more careful. They're playing the longer game, and I think that's even bigger threat to us than the Soviets ever were.
Yeah, well, in two respects, you're right. They have hidden, as they've bided their time, what their true agenda is until recently. It's now, as I say, they're becoming more Soviet-like in their aggressiveness. Xi Jinping is talking about a China dream that is explicitly a threat to us. But the other way in which this is vastly more dangerous, Matt, and you're so right about this, is the Chinese are in our knickers to a degree that the Soviets could only have dreamed of being, in terms of their investments, in terms of their holding our debt, in terms of the companies that want to do business with them over there and are doing it on their terms, and just more the influence
and their global dominance. I mean, I went to Panama a couple years ago, and I went to the Panama Canal, and I saw these ships going through the canal. First off, we gave up control of the canal, which was a huge concession. But then
effectively.
Right, and that's what I was going to say is I saw, I don't know, I had dinner at the restaurant right there on the canal, and I have to say, like, we saw a whole bunch of ships go through over there. Most of them were Chinese ships.
Yeah, well, the ports at either end of the canal are controlled by the Chinese. It essentially gives them the capacity to deny our Navy the ability to pivot, if we need to, ships from the Atlantic into the Pacific should there be a conflict with China. I mean, this is one of the strategic choke points that the Chinese have now taken effective control of, Matt. And this is why this is now a global threat to us, both of the military kind and, of course, of the economic and political, geostrategic kind.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. There's so much more we need to talk about on this, but we're out of time right now, so we'll leave it there. But we'll talk more about this in the coming weeks and months ahead. Frank Gaffney from the Center for Security Policy. Sir, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us here on Breitbart News Daily.
My pleasure. Thank you, Matt.